Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is O-Sheena. I'm really happy that you're here. So I'm going to be sharing all of the books that I read in January. It was a really good reading month, so I'm thankful for that. It was a really exciting month. I did a lot of fun things, so I'm excited to talk about them. So I actually read a pretty good selection of nonfiction, so I'm going to talk about the fiction books I read first and then the nonfiction. So maybe I'll put a timestamp or whatever, you can just like click ahead and see when I start talking about nonfiction books. So yeah, I'll do all the fictions first. So number one, I did read Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers, and this is the first exciting thing that I will talk about. So I did a live show on this book. It was my first ever live show, and I had such a good experience, and really it's because, first of all, Amy was an amazing co-host. I really enjoyed talking with her. And then everyone that joined in, I just really appreciated the interaction that you gave and just everything that you said about this book. I just had such a good time talking about it with everyone. So that was amazing. And yeah, I gave this 5 stars again. This was the second time that I had read this. And I was wondering if I was going to like it the same because I read it for the first time about 9 years ago. And so I just wasn't sure if it was going to hit the same, but it totally did. I just identify with Angel's story so much. Just seeing the redeeming love of Jesus in her life, it never gets old, and I loved it. So yeah, I was really happy to read this and then discuss it with everyone. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. If you joined in, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed it. Okay, then the first week of January, I also hosted a readathon with Holly, and I read 3 books for that. The first fiction book that I finished was Shadows of Swansea, Abbey by Julie Klassen, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. This follows a woman who is like a ladies' friend, what do you call them? Companion? Not in a weird way, but just like she is hired to be a friend of this richer lady, and they go to stay at this old inn that used to be a nunnery. Is that what you call it? Or a monastery? Nunnery? Whatever. A place where nuns live. And anyways, so there's a bunch of people staying. It's kind of like a museum too, like there's history with it, so people like take tours. And anyways, so they're staying there, and it turns out that 2 brothers that this girl knew growing up are also staying there. So they're like, oh hi, and they like, you know, reconnect. And then a murder happens. So the book centers around figuring out who murdered this person, but then also there is a romance between the lady and one of her friends, and you really get to know some of the funny characters that are staying at this inn. There's a bit of a is there a ghost kind of thing going on, and it was like fun. It was fun. It wasn't my favorite Julie Klassen book, but I still think it was worth the read and I would recommend it. Okay, next I read Lulus Cafe by T.I. Lowe, and I loved it, okay? 5 stars, so stinking good. Add it to the list, man, like of all of the contemporary romance books that I love, because this was so good. Like this was deeply good, okay? So thank you to everyone who recommended it to me, because really when I was reading the Beach Haven series, I wasn't that impressed, okay? Like they were fine, but nothing amazing. But everyone was like, seriously, read Lulus Cafe and Under the Magnolias. Is that the next one? Anyways, but everyone's like, read Lulus Cafe, and I was like, all right, I will. And it's so good. Okay, so it starts off pretty intense, and it's about really intense things. Like this is not a lighthearted book, okay? So be prepared, because the cover makes it look like, oh, just a, you know, fancy little romance, whatever. But no. This is like Redeeming Love level of intensity, okay? So it opens with you're following this girl who is married, and she is in an extremely abusive marriage, and it's described. So it's actually similar to, if you've read Safe Haven by Nicholas Sparks, similar descriptions. Safe Haven was very descriptive. This one isn't as, I guess. But like, you know exactly what he's doing to her when he's beating her up, basically. And I mean, the first quarter, maybe a little less than a quarter of the book is following this girl in this marriage and like how she's surviving and what it's doing to her inner self. it's crazy. So I was captivated from the beginning because of that, because it was written very well. I was very impressed. And then, you know this from the back, but she ends up escaping, but she like is super beat up. Anyway, she finds her way to this small town, and she is just sitting in this cafe, and the owner, Lulu, sees her, and God basically touches her heart and is like, you need to take care of this girl. So Lulu just like welcomes her and wraps her up with kindness and love, and is like, I have a place for you to stay, you can work for me, and just starts nursing her back to health, basically. And so the whole book is like, she's in this new town working at this cafe and like, you know, recovering. So then there's also now I forget. Lulu has like kind of a grandson, but like, I don't think they're blood related. He checks in and everything, and he's very suspicious of this girl at first, but then they get to know each other, and it is a romance between the two of them, but there's so much more going on than just that, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. I thought it was such a well-told story. But yeah, a lot of trigger warnings for this book to do with pregnancy stuff and abuse. Yeah, so I would still highly recommend it. It was really, really good. Okay, and then I finally reread Longley Gone by Charles Martin. Yes, this was really good. I gave it 5 stars again. Now, to be honest, it didn't hit the same reading it for the second time. So that was interesting to me. I don't know if it was the time I was reading it or what. I don't know. Sometimes his writing, I don't know if this is the right word, but it feels gratuitous, if that makes sense. Like, he's very poetic, I guess, when he writes, and he definitely has a writing style. Sometimes it feels too much, if that makes sense. I don't know. I just noticed it this time around reading it, but the story itself was still epically amazing, and I still really enjoyed it, but it was almost the writing that made me be like, get on with it, you know? But maybe, I don't know. That's just my honest opinion. So yeah, I still gave it 5 stars because it still hits the same at the end, and the progression of the characters and the storyline, I think it's brilliant. And this is a prodigal son retelling. You follow a pastor who is like a traveling preacher, him and his son, and they really love music, so he gets his son to like learn guitar and piano and like teaches them all about music, but they use that to like lead worship basically at these speaking events that the dad does. And the son gets fed up and he's like, Dad, I don't want to do this anymore. And when he's 18, he steals his dad's guitar and his truck and all his money and drives to Nashville to try to make a name for himself. And so you get flashbacks, like it's told, I guess, in the present time where the son is an old guy and he's like, well, he's not old. I don't actually know how old, maybe 40s, 50s. Anyways, older guy, and he like ends up meeting some characters that trigger flashbacks to his life. And so then you see like the story of him and his dad and the traveling speaking and him going to Nashville and what happened in Nashville and stuff. So there's like a big chunk of the book where it's like just him in Nashville, but it's being told like he's telling a story, and then you come back to like the present of what's going on with him. It's pretty intense. It was really good, and it's very music focused, so he does talk about different like music theory stuff sometimes, and I found that really fascinating. And then he uses like real places in Nashville to describe, like he talks about the Ryman all the time and stuff like that. So, but again, just because I've read it before, I knew it was coming, and I just found that I wanted to just get through it really quick, and the writing kind of made it so it was like a slower read, I guess, because he's like taking his time, which is totally fine. Like the first time I read it, I loved it. I thought it was like so beautiful and amazing. So, okay, there we go. Okay, and then I did read The Lady's Mind by Francine Rivers. So I realized that I should probably read it a bit sooner before it comes out so that I can review it better when it comes out. I did film a completely separate review video for this book, and I'm gonna put it up probably on the Monday before it releases, so February 7th, because it releases February 8th. So anyways, but yes, I did read this in January. So I ended up giving it 4 stars, which is the second book by her that I've given 4 stars. So I'm like, okay, like, it's good to know. In my perfect world, I would give every one of her books 5 stars and I would love them to pieces every time. But this one hit different because, first of all, it was very lighthearted and didn't have the like deep heart issues that she usually tackles in her books. And so I just like, because that's what she's known for me, that's what I want from her. And so it was like kind of weird to not go there. But at the same time, I read the author's note at the end, and she said she did this on purpose because of the pandemic. She just felt like we need some laughter and light in our lives, and she wanted to contribute to that with this book. So totally respect that, and I still like love her as an author and will continue to read her books, and she's still my favorite author, and you know, everything like that. So anyways, so this follows a girl who is sent by her mom and her stepdad to California because she is causing issues. She is kind of high on the suffragette movement. It's set in the early 1900s, something like that, or late 1800s, I think. And it's when like gold mining is really popular in California. So her uncle willed his stuff to her basically. So she moves to California to like claim it all and figure out what to do. And basically her parents say like, don't come back. Like, we don't want you here anymore. So pretty harsh, but yeah. So you just follow her. She moves to this small town, and the people that she meets in the town, her uncle owned a newspaper, so she wants to start it up again, but everyone's like, a woman can't run a newspaper, so she like fights against that. I really enjoyed the characters. I think they stood out the most in this book, but also the setting. I found it very vivid and I enjoyed reading about that. It's definitely written to reflect the time that it's set in, because women did not have a lot of rights, and basically they were just meant to produce children and keep the house clean. And so men are quite annoying like that in this book, but it did make me very thankful for how far we've come and that women have the rights that we have now. Yeah, and then also the faith was really great in it. Both the characters prayed a lot. They went to church. There's my little review, but I did make a completely separate review video for it, so that'll be going up next week. And I would still say, like, check it out if any of that sounds good to you. If the back intrigued you, like, yeah, I think it's worth reading. Okay, and lastly, I read In Search of a Prince by Toni Shiloh, and this is the first book I've ever read by this author, and I'm so thankful that I got to read it because it actually comes out today, February 1st. So yeah, I got it as an ARC on NetGalley, so I'm thankful for that and very impressed. Wow, I thought the writing was great, and what the story was about is like so fun. So it's set in present day, and there's this like made up island kingdom off the coast of Africa, and the king is sick, and so he knows. So okay, his son, the prince, died, but before he died, he actually married an American woman, and they had a kid together. Now that the king knows he's dying, he calls up this woman and is like, hey, you got to bring your daughter because she's the next heir to the throne. And so you follow this girl being like, I'm a princess, my grandfather's a king. What? Because she was born after her dad died, so she never met her dad. She didn't even know that he was royalty. So she ends up going to this island, she meets her grandfather, the king, and she has to decide if she wants to be the heir to the throne when her grandfather dies. And so, yeah, it was like exciting, you know, everyone's dream come true. But at the same time, it was pretty rough. Like it wasn't, I think it was told as realistically as possible. So this girl was 25, which was also nice. She was a bit older, and it was completely filled with Christianity, and I loved it. Like, that island is a Christian nation, which is nice. So her grandfather was a Christian, and then she and her mom are also Christian. So they were praying all throughout the book, and it just was so nice. It fit so well, and the prayers were just so honest. Like, that's really what stood out. Like, oh, it was really good. And so I guess this is on the back. I haven't even read what it's about, actually. So it says In Search of a Prince. So I feel like this makes sense. But basically, the council of the kingdom is like, well, she can't actually be queen unless she's married. So if she wants to be queen, she needs to find a husband. And so the book is her trying to find someone to marry. And that part was like, you know, typical storyline, but even how that kind of came about and who she ended up being with, I feel like it was as realistic as possible. Definitely unrealistic, but fun to read. And there's like kind of a new language introduced. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a completely made up African language. So they use some terminology, which was cool. And it was fun. It was great. Clean romance. So awesome, and lots of faith in it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this book. If that sounds good to you, check it out. It comes out today, so you can get it now. Okay, on to the nonfiction that I read. So I read some great nonfiction. Praise God. So the first one that I read is The Case for Grace by Lee Strobel. I read this for a read in the new year as well, and I loved this book. This is actually the first full book that I finished this year, and I gave it 5 stars because it was just so good, because Lee Strobel went and interviewed and like kind of got the life story of different people and how God showed grace to them. And he made sure to like include people of different ethnicities, different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, and different situations where God met them with his grace. And I was just so encouraged by it. It was so beautiful, and I loved it. So would definitely recommend this. And then next, I read A Long Obedience in the Same Direction by Eugene Peterson. And I loved this book. Okay, this was also 5 stars because it met me at the exact right time. Like, I was reading this. Some of you know that I've been waiting for a job to get back to me. And there was just themes in this book that spoke to my season of waiting and my season of uncertainty so directly. I just know that God arranged for me to read this book when I did, and I was so blessed by it. So this is such a good book. It talks about the Christian life and what living as a Christian means, and how it's not meant to be so like based on our feelings and what we're feeling in a moment. It's more so about like the foundation of truth that we have in the Bible and what God has said, and that's what keeps us anchored. And I just loved that, because our feelings can lie to us, you know, and circumstances can look a certain way, and we only have one perspective, but we need to like have God's perspective on our life and how he's always in control. And I loved it. So would super recommend this one. He did use the Psalms of Ascent, I think, to like make his point. It was really cool how each Psalm definitely helped just be the truth in what he was saying. And so I really enjoyed that. Okay, next I read I Love the Word Impossible by Ann Kiemel. Never heard of this lady, but I got this book from my grandma, and this is told in verse, which is interesting. So it's told like in verse, and it's funny because it doesn't use punctuation as much as it should. Like, there's commas and periods, but not all the time. And then I don't know if she uses any capital letters other than with God, or when she's like doing like all caps. Most of the time there's no capital letters. So like, to be honest, as a former English teacher, that grinds my gears a little bit, but because I knew it was poetry, I'm like, okay, fine. But other than that, the content was amazing. She just like shares different things about life that she's learning, and it just was so inspiring and really nice to read. And I don't know, man, it was good. It's cool because it kind of comes full circle. So she starts out with like a kind of a journal entry or a poem about New Year's Eve, and then she ends the book with the next New Year's. So it just was like cool to see that, and how she's like, God's faithfulness has been wrapped up in this year this whole time. And she shares just stories from her life and little insights, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, is that it? That's it. Yeah, so I did read a lot of good books, and I'm feeling good. I really appreciate all of your positivity and prayers for me. God is on the move, and as much as, you know, waiting can be really discouraging, he's so good to meet us in it. And so yeah, that's all I'll say for now. I do hope to share more, but we shall see. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Wow, okay, here we go. You follow, I mean, okay. I think